Hello, welcome back to my mixing walkthrough of It's Karate Time from Cobra Kai. In the previous two episodes, we looked at orchestra and percussion. Now we're going to take a look at the drum kit in this cue. So we have one folder, one drum stem, and it looks like we have a lot of drums. So drums are all the way through. Then we also have in this Sam, the drummer on this project, also did some Rototom overdubs and looks like just some Tom overdubs later. I do remember that these were added later just because we thought it would be cool, so he sent in some extra tracks. And then there are in sections here some sampled drum kit sounds. I think these are kind of sort of drum machine kind of sounds, these metal sounds. This is sort of a Terminator vibe thing going on here that just worked a lot better with samples and just sounded fine that way, blended with the drums. So as always, everything's turned off to begin with. All the reverbs are muted, all the bus processing, and all of the channel plugins are turned off. Let's just take a listen to what this drum kit sounds like. Well, actually, let's turn off these. This is without the samples. I did use some drum samples in here. It's a pretty decent sounding drum kit. Sam just records at home, so I get these tracks from him. As you can see, sometimes there's some overs. You know, I love musicians, but sometimes they don't watch their levels because they're focusing on playing, but it's nothing that's really a problem. I don't hear it distorting. A little distortion on snare is probably not the worst thing. Might just add a little bit of nice clipping, sort of high end. Anyhow, let's turn on my, let's add the samples in. As you can hear, it sounds fine. It's a very natural sounding drum kit, but I really wanted a big epic sound for some of these action cues and a little bit more emphasis on the kick. So these Steven Slate samples here, just using trigger, literally, I think, I just double bust it here. If you don't know, I think if you hold down control, I believe, this is part of my template, so I forgot the key command, but if you hold down control, you can add extra outputs. So you can, holding down control, you can just, sum things together. So in this case, I have it going to the kick trigger, and the snare is double bust here to the stem output and the trigger input. And then I have it on a separate channel so that I can process it differently. The kick, I just did a little EQ with this Helios. Did nothing on the snare, but then I could change the levels here on faders. It's just like having it on a console, do different sends, so on and so forth. I could insert these directly on the tracks, but for example, the snare, I am using a dry sample and then this NRG room sound, so I wanted that to be in stereo, but I wouldn't want to make the mono snare here a stereo per se. This is just the way I like having it on a return fader, so I can kind of play with it, I can automate it, so on and so forth. Anyhow, the big drum sound is adding these kicks and snares, so let's hear what that sounds like a little bit later here when he's doing more tom work. So just, makes it sound a little more finished, a little bit bigger. I especially just like the room of NRG. I've actually recorded Sam, the exact same drummer, at NRG. In that case, I never use any samples because it's something that I recorded in a nice room, nice big room, not recorded at Sam's place of residence. Anyhow, here's what I'm doing on the channels. It looks like just some EQ. That's the kick in, adding a little snap. Kick out was really low, and since it's, there's a lot of bleed because it was outside of the kick in the front, so I filtered it out. Didn't think I needed any extra high end from that mic, and then just clear up some mid range. The snare, just a tiny bit of EQ. Then you can see these are all gated too. I love the FabFilter gate. It's really easy to use and sounds great. Toms, decent amount of EQ. You'll hear a big change on the toms when I turn this on, and then you probably heard they sound a little bit quiet. They sounded really roomy, but that's because this plugin is the compressor is giving it quite a bit of gain on the tom microphones, and those are all different for each one. We'll dive into that more in a second. We got a mono overhead. I just did a little, just one EQ band looks like, and some filtering. The overheads, same kind of thing, just a little EQ. You can see I reverse panned them because, of course, Sam is a drummer, so of course he recorded this and organized this in drummer's perspective. I like audience perspective because who listens to a drum kit played by someone else from behind the drum kit? That could be debated all day and night into eternity. That's how I like to do it. Anyhow, and then a mono room mic, again, just a little EQ, and then I think I compressed the crap out of it with this 1176. Actually, not too much. Sometimes I'll do the all in button. You know, what is it, like option click? You can do. How do you do all? I don't know. There's a way to do all buttons, I think. But there's number 4. Let's turn that on. Yeah, so kind of cleaning up a lot of the that sounds a little bit choked when you're hearing it now, but in the full mix, all that cymbal bleed and all the extra bleed that the gates are taking care of from the kick and snare mics really helps clear up the mix. I maybe wouldn't gate things so heavily if there wasn't so much other stuff going on, but that's kind of what that sounds like with those turned on. Let's take a listen here. There's this little breakdown section in this part of the cue where we have these Rototom and Tom Brakes, and I think the Rototoms came in first, and then the Toms were added later. And originally we wanted to do either or, but here we used both, and then we alternated here. The second phrase here, we just did Toms again, and then just Rototoms. And what I did here was kind of fun. I reverse panned the Toms versus the Rototoms, so when they go left to right, the tom fill goes the other direction. It was kind of fun to almost imagine Sam spinning in his chair with the drums all around him. But here's that little break with no processing. So that's the section that was really fun to kind of have the pans go the other way. Let's turn on the processing. This is probably the exact same processing copied over from the drum kit and then modified. Here's that. Yeah. Okay, then we have some samples going on. This is largely just this section. Looks like we have the snare kind of doubling up here. Probably just has an extra long thing going on. What's going on there? Yeah, just an element we liked doubled up with the drums there. Pretty subtle, not a huge part of things. Then all this stuff, this is the sort of program. It already has an RMX 16 on it, some delays, we got the reverse snares down there. So really these take sort of center stage. We have kick and snare from Sam going on here, but at this part of the track, it's really about those sampled drums. So there's all of that. Well, let's turn on our processing. What did we do? Just some filtering and a couple little cuts here. Looks like this M1 kick and delay kick. I use transient designers to give a decent amount more attack and less sustain. Sometimes these samples, they just get a little ringy and they just sort of eats up the low end. So I like to use that plugin to cut back the sustain so that they're not just hanging out for so long. It looks like the kick we just muted. Delay kick we use. What's this here? Yeah, so just the sort of effecty kick going on there. M1 kick here, I was probably in it at some point, but then we decided it was too much going on and that Sam's recorded kick sounded better. There's that. Effects. I have the 140 channel is really just, as you can see here, it's either a 140 or a 480. In this case, we wanted a really long snare reverb going on here. So I have this fat plate, 2.1. It's not super long, but it's a little bit longer than the plate would. Then some EQ here, boosting the high end. We really wanted that effect to cut through. I believe this is in a certain part of the song we really wanted to hear epic snare verb. So that's that. I am using my own AMS RMX 16 on this as well, though it's turned down -10. Altiverb, since Sam recorded in a smaller room at home, I use a lot of this Clinton. I love this preset for drums, or this convolution rather for drums. Just makes it sound like it's in a nice big space. That is, I've never worked in the studio, but I do love how this convolution and Altiverb sounds on drums. Low ender I don't think I used at all. And then I have a parallel crush bus here. So it's just everything on a send here. I think in this case, sometimes I don't send overheads or certain other things. But since I have it on a send, I can mute different channels that I don't want going to this bus. In this case, everything's going there at unity and then getting the snot compressed out of it. Nuke mode, doing quite a bit. And that, we'll turn that on. It just lifts the drums a little bit, adds a little bit more presence and oomph without necessarily gaining up the master. So let's add in effects while they're playing. Actually, let's listen to just the drum kit for this. So I didn't use actually a ton of that Clinton room. But just adding a little space. Let's do the 480 next. So that's long. That's big. Sort of a vintagey 80s, epic sort of 480 snare sound. Now, it sounds really, really wet right now, but in the mix, we have the reverb at that level because it needs to cut through the mix. And then, of course, I do love on this project being able to use some gated reverb, so here's that added in. That's what that sounds like. I don't have a lot of it in there because I didn't really want to have too much of that kind of Phil Collins effect, but it's just in there a bit to give it a little bit of extra space. So there's the effects. Let's turn on this crush bus. So I have it turned down a good amount, -13 in this case. It's not doing a lot. Some of the other cues where I really needed a lot more drums, I can turn that fader up. And again, it'll add a little bit of gain. Of course, it's more audio signal being summed together into the bus, but that just kind of allows me to give a little bit more presence, a little more punch without necessarily just turning all of the drums up. So you can see how compressed this is. Quite a bit of gain reduction. If we look at the room mic here, we can look at that earlier. Yeah, that's just completely slammed. Quite a bit going on there. Yeah. Just a little extra room. What was I doing? Let's check out the bus. So I didn't do a lot on the Pro Q here. Just a little bit of cut, low, mid, high. Again, like I said in previous episodes, I think this low-mid cut was just that the whole Q was getting a little heavy in the low-mids. So I went through every stem and probably just on the master here, just pulled some back on most of the stems. This was just a little bit of brightness when it was getting loud and getting big. The drums are just a little bit too bright. Excuse me. That's what that sounds like. EQ, this is the same exact settings it looks like as the other percussion stems. And this is doing the Pultec low-end trick and then also the 8K boost just for a little extra presence. Just lifts it up a bit. And then finally, the SSLG compressor. This, I believe, is doing a lot more than the other percussion ones were doing. Yeah, a little more kiss there. Yeah, so there you have it. There's the drums on this cue. In the next episode, I'll be going over bass and guitars, so stay tuned and watch the next episode. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.